I'm Brandon Miller, and you are listening to Coach. This weekly series dives deep into the world of Clifton strengths and how they impact your daily life. Hear from certified strengths coaches on the ins and outs, quirks, and characteristics of all 34 strengths and 4 domains and how they play out in real life. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to the Strengths Whisperer Season 2, Coach to Coach, and I am here today with Jen Pasquale, and we are talking about the restorative strength. Now, this is one in particular for me that I'm very curious to learn more about. It is number 34 of 34 on my strengths list, and it is one that I have some interesting tales to tell about how I have interacted and grown. Jen is here today to be our resident restorative expert. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brandon. Happy to be here.
I appreciate it. And your company, leadwithcuriosity.co, that's CO, friends, leadwithcuriosity.co. You specialize in team building, small to mid-sized company with 2 in particular industries. Sounds like they might have found you. That's fun how that works in marketing. They find you, you don't find them, but nonprofits and pharma. Love to hear a little bit about Lead with Curiosity and what you're up to.
Yeah. So thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me. I always love to talk strengths with with anyone, but certainly with you. So for me, Lead with Curiosity is really about leaning into strengths and leaning into this curiosity around who we are and also what we can bring to the table and helping teams do that more effectively through this kind of strengths lens that all of us coaches love to do.
Very good. And so when you're working with organizations, what sort of things are you up to with them? You mentioned team building is something in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of my favorite situations are usually working with organizations where they're going through an expansion. So maybe there's new leadership and we kind of need to level set the team again, help everyone kind of get to know each other under a new vision and under, new direction. So organizations that are expanding are kind of my sweet spot. I think I seem to do a lot of offsites because that's just a place where I think it's easy to dip your toe into strengths work and in team development with a strengths lens. So supporting organizations with those offsite events and leader development events is another kind of favorite for me.
Love it. Love it. And where are you coming to us from today?
So I'm based just outside DC in Virginia.
Okay, very cool. And are your on-sites usually in remote places or just in their same vicinity? Where do people typically like to bring you?
So I've done the kind of combination. I've done some where I'm being brought into their offsite. I've had some global clients, and so they're not always sending me to those remote locations around the world. And so sometimes I'm virtually in, but usually it's, I prefer to do offsites where everybody kind of leaves the office and we go to a different location where we can really just focus on what we're doing and how we're kind of building the team together. But it's certainly a combination. A lot of DC work. If I can be local, I prefer to, but certainly traveled quite a bit under the pharma umbrella up to Boston and worked with organizations up there.
Very good. All right. So Jen, how would you like to introduce restorative to us? So you saw your Clifton Strengths results in restorative right there, and you thought to yourself, here I am. Here's my strength. So can you tell us about this particular one?
Yeah. So I have kind of had a love-hate with restorative from the beginning. I think it is one of the strengths that is the least intuitive, or maybe not the least, but at least for me, it wasn't very intuitive. If I look at some of my others, those seemed I could kind of guess what that might mean. Restorative was a little harder for me. And when I found strengths, I was in a season where I felt really lost professionally. And so it was kind of ironic that restorative was my number one because it's really about kind of problem solving and trying to figure out what's going on and kind of get to the root of this issue. And for me, it was this issue of feeling kind of professionally and personally lost and needing some direction. And so there was some irony in the fact that restorative was number one for me. But initially, I had a hard time settling into it. I kind of didn't like it because I felt like it was the reason. I blamed it for a lot right out of the gate, right? It was the reason why things felt hard. It was the reason why I couldn't just kind of make progress in the ways that I wanted to in my business at the time. I hung a lot on restorative and said it was the reason that things weren't going quite the way I wanted them to. I think as I've learned more about it, I've come to appreciate the fact that the kind of the creative problem solving that I do for teams is because I have that restorative and because I can really help them kind of put pieces together and help them see what might not be going right. I love process improvement. So it makes sense that restorative is kind of part of my DNA. But initially, I was not a fan.
What parts of it have you grown to appreciate and really embrace? And what parts of it do you still take a little getting over it?
I think the parts that I appreciate are just how I am able to see things that other people might not see. Like I've watched that happen over and over again, where maybe we're all looking at the same problem, we're looking at the same challenge in an organization or on a team, and I'll be able to kind of come in with this sort of this side angle, if you will, and be able to say something, and everybody kind of stops and goes, "Oh, I had never thought of that. I never saw that." So the ability to like see that thing that other people aren't seeing is something I've really come to appreciate, because I've seen how it can impact and just sort of streamline progress in a way that, I'm sure I could have used some other strength to get there, but for me, that's just the most natural way for me to get there. I think the challenge that I have with it, and my coach, when I first did my strengths report, my coach at the time, she was really great at pointing out that the challenge that I have and my struggle with it is not assigning problem status to everything. So, her example was, if there's dishes in the sink, that's not really a problem I have to solve, right? That doesn't require my restorative to get to the other side of that task. But for me, it was what I noticed is that sometimes I would assign a problem status to something that maybe wasn't. Maybe it was just a fact, or it was just a thing. And instead, I've almost made it a little bit bigger, because that felt like then something I could solve, right? It's like creating a problem so I can solve a problem, because that's my sweet spot and that's comfortable. But sometimes that doesn't always serve me. So it's just noticing, like, when am I creating a little bit more to this than I need to, because then I get to do the thing I love to do. And so that's my love-hate side of it.
I appreciate that very much, the way you described the assigning a problem to it. So I mentioned that restorative is my number 34, and it is also my wife's number 34. And our oldest child, when she was going through her teenage years, this was a time back, she's 31 years old now. So this was a very early in our journey, really understanding strengths. And when the 34 report came out and was available, we had the hardest time relating to her, just very difficult. And just found ourselves at times wondering why she naturally saw things through the filter that her mind would take. And in her case, it was usually assigned some kind of negative connotation. So trying to help her not see things that way, and then recognizing that way of viewing the world often came back on herself. She was really, really hard on herself, very self-critical. And when we did StrengthsFinder and realized that her number one strength was our 34. So she's a number one restorative. And we're over here with both of us. I'm a number one maximizer. My wife's maximizer is like number 3. We're wondering why she's not being a maximizer. We're wondering, why aren't you seeing what we see? Why aren't you trying to build good to great? Why aren't you taking, why are you spending those times on things broken when there's so many things that are already going well that we can make stronger? And what we came to appreciate when we learned her strengths was that this was our daughter being authentic. This is who she is. And as we began to grow with her and maturing and understanding, hey, self-criticism, we all go through that. Let's learn to tone that down. And where do you naturally want to solve? And so as it would happen, she was in the Performing Arts Academy in her school. And as much as she loved performing, and she's a beautiful singer, that was never going to be her niche. She could be in the chorus, could be a part of that, but where she drew back was costume, makeup, and hair. Like, loved to be in the room doing that. And it has led to her career. She owns a salon, and she does colors and cuts. And my wife and I joke, you will always have business, sweetheart. You will never not have a job as long as women have hair. You will always have a job. And she does very, very well for herself, just launched her own spot. But that journey, I tell you, it saved our relationship with her, because it helped us to appreciate, no, this isn't our daughter being anything but authentic. And as she has grown, we trust her for that ability when she sees and can solve something. She's very brave. She's great in crisis. Very calm, actually, can measure down and see results very quickly. So, that's been my story and journey, and I appreciate how you're describing your own opportunity of growth with this.
Yeah, it's funny. As you were talking, I was thinking about kind of my own version of the negativity, because I do think that is something I've struggled with, because I can be in a room and I'm gonna see that kind of, and again, some other strengths involved, right? But I'm gonna see some second order impacts that other people aren't gonna see, and I'm going to want to talk about those, and I'm going to want to bring those up, and I'm going to want to make sure we are considering those, which can sometimes have that negative lens, if you will. And so it is definitely something that I have continued to struggle with around restorative, that not everybody sees it that way, right? Not everybody's just going to see those pieces that I'm seeing. And so my negativity feels out of place in those moments. And I don't think of it as negative. I think of it as realism. I think of it as pragmatic. Like, I think of it under this very different definition. But the perception of it and the way it feels to other people when I don't qualify it, and it's one of the things I've started doing with people that know me well, is I can say, okay, I do this with my husband, right? Okay, I'm going to lean into my, whatever the strength is, right? I'm going to lean into my restorative for a minute. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm thinking, so that they can kind of understand where I'm coming from. And so it doesn't feel like criticism of them, or it doesn't feel like, negativity of the situation. It's just me seeing it in a way that someone else doesn't.
And I imagine in the work that you do, seeing and solving growth restrictive challenges is incredibly helpful to your clients, because you are going to see underlying problems. You're going to see trends. You're going to see patterns that, if you can source it down to root cause, now we're actually solving for what is perpetuating the problem, not medicating the symptom of the problem. And I imagine that that's something that you might be really good at in your work.
No, I mean, I think I am.
That's your moment to go, well, yes, I am.
I think that's what made me really, when I understood my strengths, because I had been doing facilitation for years before I did strengths. I was in training and development for 20 years. And so I had a deep background in facilitation and in working with teams, but the strengths layer came later. And so it was interesting to kind of see and have language for, oh, right, okay, this restorative part of me is why I was a great facilitator. It's why I was able to distill down into, okay, so what I heard you say is this one thing, and it's one sentence instead of 4 paragraphs. And for them, it felt accurate, right? So that it was really fun for me to have that language and recognize that I was good at that for a long time without the language of why I was good at it. But now to have that was just I think it's for a lot of folks, right? It's a very empowering thing to be able to understand what it is that you're uniquely bringing. And for me, it is this kind of unique problem solving piece.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it gives comfort to those you work with that you're not afraid to step in and get into what needs to be talked about, and the delicacy, right, of what it is that needs to happen, right?
I was just thinking about the challenge is figuring out, because everyone doesn't have restorative, right? Finding that balance where you can bring that distilled version to the table, but building the trust first, right? To make sure people are sort of ready for the distilled version and ready for your perspective. Because if theirs is 34, then what it feels like is you're bringing that negativity. So I think the ownership is important, but it's also knowing how and when to use it to make sure that you can kind of keep that conversation and that communication as open as it can be and needs to be for it to be productive.
I was describing how my daughter, and I can ascribe this to other people on my team who I work with, that they're really measured in the midst of crisis. They do a really good job where it actually is as though the problem just gets into focus for them, and then they can really begin to assess and address and solve what's going on. And I'm curious for you, if you have found in crisis that your strength does actually lock in for you. It enables you to really measure it down to, here's what happens next. And if you can ascribe that to restorative as one of your strengths.
So my background is as an 18-year military spouse. So my husband's a 27-year active duty. So you can, kind of imagine, right? Like what my life has been like. We're now stable, but we've moved 10 times in our time together. in our 20 years together. And so as a military spouse, there's a lot that's put on my shoulders to, to figure out, to handle, to be kind of the primary on a lot of things over the years. And so I think my restorative, again, not having the language earlier, it served me incredibly well at just being able to be, I'm not a big fan of the word resilient. It's like a bad word in the military space if you're a military spouse, because a lot of military spouses are just sort of tired of being resilient. But it is a fact that resiliency was a big part of how I got to that 20-year mark, right? How I was able to sort of sustain military life and that much instability had to do with my kind of adaptability in this piece, right? Being able to figure out what needs to be done, figure out how we get to the next thing. How's the next move going to look? What are the problems we need to fix and identify for the next piece of instability that's coming? I think the restorative was a huge part of what made that life kind of workable for me, right? I'm sure, again, could have used something else, but for me, I think the challenge was, again, not finding problems and focusing on solutions, because sometimes it was just frustrating to be always in problem-solving mode in that life. But I think it served me really well overall, and it's probably where I continued to hone that craft, if you will, of problem-solving.
Yeah, I do appreciate that in addition to restorative's ability to see the problem so they can see what's wrong, it's really the credit for seeing the solution as well and the multiple choice version of that. So it's not just one solution you see, you can actually identify several pathways to move through it. And it seems to almost happen in rapid succession. So I've assessed the issue and here, or the way this goes, and 10 moves. That's a lot. 10 moves. But I imagine by 4 or 5, you were pretty adept at it. You were getting to the point of you could just, all right, keep things organized because we don't know when the next move's coming. So you learn to just live like that, right?
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the terms I've heard used to describe this strength, and I'm curious how you see it, and we'll just talk first about the term. So the term is the fixer. So when you think about the fixer, it's we got two sides at odds. We got an issue over here. We got something broke over there. We got just something we can't figure out. You bring in the fixer, right? It's a job. It's a life. I mean, it's a big thing. And I think of this strength as that is one of the areas of genius, is being the fixer. And I'm wondering, if you've identified with that, you see yourself that way, you whether you formally have used it or not. Because I almost wonder for folks with high restorative, when I think about their business model, that you almost could identify and market yourself as the fixer. You call me because I'm the fixer. And I mean, in many cases, it's a thing. I mean, that's, they're sought after because that's their gift, is they see the solution. What do you think about that?
I mean, I certainly see that. It's interesting. I can't say that I have thought about walking in a room and sort of putting that hat on for myself.
I want to get you a name badge and a hat.
I think I need one. But I think part of I think where my hesitation comes from is because it almost feels like it doesn't fully represent the impact that I feel like I'm able to have, right? Because I think part of the value of the restorative is in my ability to see those pieces while also being able to provide the solution. And that's probably some other talents coming into play, but I think there's a lot of that where, yes, I'm fixing, but I can't adequately fix if I can't also kind of take that broader perspective and understand, well, how did we get here, right? So part of this is wanting to uncover and get to the root cause. If I just want to fix, then I'm kind of bypassing the root cause. I'm not as interested in that. But for me as a restorative, I'm very interested in the root cause, almost to the point where I think, as a business owner, sometimes it's challenging, right? You just need to kind of do the thing and you may not get the answer. But I think when I'm working with teams or organizations, understanding the root cause is how we prevent it. And so there's this part of me that does my restorative work is both sort of assessment and solution, and not just solution, because then we run the risk of being there again.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, if you're just treating the symptoms, you're not ever getting to the cause, and that even as a maximizer is frustrating. As someone who leads with maximizer, that's where I think restorative maximizer they go from distant cousins if they're on opposite spectrums to conjoined twins because they actually want the same things. Let's get this solved at the root so we can build on it and take it further. Very good. So we have a resource for our listeners, and it's called How to Be a Great Teammate to Me. And it captures in the resource the contributions and needs of each of the strengths. And I want to read a few of them for you and just check them off just to see how you relate to the terms. So in the contribution side, problem solver, quick to formulate solutions, committed to doing things well and correct, diagnosis of symptoms, and creative solutions.
Sounds pretty spot on.
Okay. So when we talk about our restorative friends, this is what they're bringing: the creative solutions, the diagnosis of the symptoms, committed to doing things right and correct. And that's a powerful one because restoratives are okay if we don't have to keep restoring the same problem over and over or creating a new one.
Yeah. Well, and as you were talking, what I was thinking about is just how important, if someone has that high restorative, then they need to be part of the process, right? They need to be part of the spitballing on how we're going to fix the thing. They need to be part of the solution. And so all those things you mentioned, what I was thinking is, how do we make sure that the people who have all those traits you just mentioned have a seat at the table so that they get to bring that part of themselves? Because if I don't get to do restorative things, I'm just not as happy.
Yeah. And that comes to the needs. So people with high restorative do need problems to solve. They like to solve. They like to find a solution. I happen to be a fan of Agatha Christie as an author, and I enjoy her famous Belgian detective, Hercule Poirot. And when I read, listened to, or watched episodes of him, something that he says is the little gray cells need stimulation. I need problems to solve. I need a case. And I marveled at that, that's what I'm here to do. So keep giving more of that to me. How about autonomy to create new ideas and solutions? Need some space, some room to work.
Yeah.
Okay. To see and understand all parts and pieces of the problem.
For sure. That's big for me.
And then how about to get things to a state of solved, perfect, done? Is that a need for you to get it, to see it through?
I don't know how much I need to see it through. Like I don't probably have as much of a drive for that as I do presenting the solution and kind of helping people then take ownership of that solution. I don't think me carrying it all the way through and being able to see it fixed is as important to me as it is kind of that, again, going back to I like the things that come before the solution more than I probably enjoy the things that come after the solution.
Yes. I imagine though that you'd like to solve it so it doesn't break again, if possible.
For sure. I'll solve all the problems, for sure.
Yeah, so to eliminate the things that get in the way of the solution. Yeah, I could see that for sure. Good. So if you were talking to those of us working with people with high restorative and we don't share it with you, what are some ways that we can partner with you to be effective?
I mean, I think we've kind of covered some of them, right? Like in order for me to be effective, I have to be part of the conversation. I have to have an opportunity to say the quiet part out loud, right? I have to be able to have the room to consider what else could be the source of the issue, what else could solve this problem that maybe someone else doesn't see, that might feel left field, but will be incredibly effective if I'm given the time to kind of walk it out for someone. So I think that would be one way to kind of help if someone were working with me and didn't know that about me.
Good. And how about if you're talking to your friends with restorative and you were going to help them, if they're a listener, one of our listeners here, high restorative, wants to really, continue to develop and grow this, or someone who's either internal using restorative as part of their work inside of an organization, or like yourself, external, they're a business owner and they're using that. What are some tips that you can give to sharpen and develop and grow their restorative strength?
It probably depends on the restorative, right? But sometimes it's giving them that opportunity to really just kind of think without boundaries, if you will, right? Like not making any assumptions about what a solution might look like, but just being able to put any option on the table, being able to consider what could be possible, getting them to really peel several layers back on an idea and giving them the space to kind of run that down I think those are some things that help me. Like when I am struggling with the decisions, if I were trying to help someone who had high restorative, it is often helpful just to give them the space to think about all the different ways it could be impacted.
Good. Thank you. Jen Pasquale, lead with curiosity.co.co, team building, small to mid-sized organizations, and two particular niches, nonprofits and pharma. And just outside of the DC area, are you Maryland or Virginia or in?
No, Virginia.
In Virginia. Very cool. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I appreciate all of your insights on restorative. Anything else that you want to mention about business or restorative before we wrap up today?
No, I think this was a thorough conversation. I loved it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining us. And dear listeners, if you would like a copy of How to Be a Great Teammate to me, again, email Brandon@34strong.com. We will make sure you get your copy. And as always, thank you for joining us today. And we'll see you next time on Coach to Coach, Strengths Whisperer Season 2.
Thank you for tuning in to the Strengths Whisperer Coach to Coach. Please feel free to reach out to Brandon to partner with 34 Strong for collaboration opportunities to serve your employees or clients together. If you are a strengths coach, lead a strengths-based team, or are a fan of strength, we invite you to receive our complimentary resource, How to Be a Good Teammate to Me, Understanding My Contributions and Needs. Email Brandon_Miller at 34strong.com to connect, and he will gladly share this resource that will continue to unlock the power of strength.